Hello, people of the internet. Welcome to the Special Report, your news and views program about geek gaming culture on the internet. Coming up in the show today, a subject that we all knew at some point was going to happen, although it doesn't really give me a great deal of joy to talk about. Stan the Man Lee, the legend in the comic book industry, has sadly passed away at the age of 95. Talk a little bit about the impact that he has put onto the comic book industry all around and how good of a guy he is, and how many people don't really have any bad things to say about him, give or take a small, minute few people who don't know what they're talking about. All this and the OC remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. A bit of a warning before I start talking about the passing of a legend known as Stan Lee is that you may hear me talk about some things you may have heard in other places, and please forgive me for that, but I do have to discuss my opinions and my thoughts about Stan Lee because this hit me pretty hard, actually, just about as hard as the Total Biscuit passing earlier this year. As you very well know, Stan Lee was in a bit of deteriorating health, and we knew at some point this was going to happen, although he also had some issues with his partner at POW Entertainment, and we all know the stories that went on about that. But sadly, on November the 12th, 2018, we have lost a legend known as Stan Lee. Now, for those of you who have probably been living under a rock, this is the guy. This was the guy at Marvel Comics. This was the guy who created such characters as the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, just to name a few. And if he didn't create it, he had a hell of a hand in the production of these comics. He was more or less the godfather of Marvel Comics. He started his career as an office assistant in Timely Comics in 1939, working odd jobs before then, and he thought that he would have probably been the only one applying for the job because he did get it. Of course, we all know, if you know the history of Timely Comics, in the early 1960s, that's when they became Marvel Comics, and that's when Stan Lee started to develop different types of superheroes, whereas they weren't written in the way where they were just for kids, that it was the superhero fighting for truth, justice, and the American way, if you want to bring the age-old saying of what Superman fights for. These were characters that had human aspects. They humanized the superhero genre. It's humanized who superheroes were. And also, they weren't just for kids. There were overarching storylines that catered more to teens, more to adults, and there were some that weren't for kids. There were some profanity-laced comics in there as well. There were more adult-oriented comics. Not to say they were pornographic or anything like that, but they were aimed more toward an older demographic to broaden the scope of who would be able to enjoy these kinds of comics, to enjoy that type of medium. And also, during that time that he was with Timely Comics, when he first got into the medium, when he first got into the field, he also served in World War II. He was proud to be a World War II vet. He was a lineman for the Signal Corps before the Army realized his writing skills, and then he went into that field, into technical writing and poster production. He had said that that was one of his proudest moments, as he received a certificate for lifetime membership in the Signal Corps and a coin for the battalion that he was in. Not many people knew that he was a part of the Army. I didn't know about that until U.S. Army tweeted that on their Twitter account when he sadly passed away. As of this moment, I'm not seeing anything on any news story about what the cause of death was. It was more or less natural causes as far as I know, so forgive me as I don't have that right in front of me. Some of the more modern fans of Marvel may recognize him from all the cameos that he did where during the Marvel MCU, he had always put himself in a cameo appearance in some of these movies. The Avengers Infinity War movie, he was a bus driver during the initial attack that Thanos did upon the Earth. And everyone who played the new Spider-Man video game, and this is a little bit of spoilery stuff going in here, not too major, but if you don't want to know anything about the Spider-Man game, please turn off for the next 30 seconds or so. But Stan Lee was the bartender slash waiter at one of the restaurants that Peter and Mary Jane met during one of the earlier scenes in the game, when they were talking about their estranged relationship at that point in time. That sadly is one of the final cameos that Stan Lee made, and it is a really big honor to see him in that role in a way that shows that he was embracing Spider-Man in video game form. Now, that was not the first time that he had actually lended his voice into a video game with Spider-Man. He had also lended his voice into the first PS1 Spider-Man game, in which he narrated some of the scenes, and also when you looked at some of the character bios, you heard Stan Lee describe who these characters were. Of course, many people know the battles that he had went through, including the death of his wife Joan of a stroke in July of last year, and of course his battles against Kira Morgan, who was a New York-based memorabilia collector who he described as his only partner business manager, who he sued for $1 billion. He dropped the suit, but now that he had the restraining order because of his passing, it means, according to NBC News, that JC Lee, his daughter, and her attorneys will resume their roles as the managers of Lee's business and assets. And that is great news, that someone within his family is going to be able to inherit that, for lack of a better term, empire that he has. And that is great news that Kira Morgan is not going to get her hands on that, because the things that have came out in the news about what she did to him are abhorrent. But I'm not going to want to get into that, because that is going to be more of me ranting and raving about what exactly she did. And please excuse me if I'm going scattershot about this, because this had hit me a great deal, because who has not been affected in one way or another by what Stan has put upon this industry, put upon the geek culture industry, put upon the comic book industry, and as a life person. He was always known as the most humble, down-to-earth guy that you could ever meet, and a lot of celebrities, a lot of people are saying that. A lot of people are saying that he was a person that you could just talk to, that loved what he did. You don't hardly see that out of many people anymore. You hardly see somebody saying, hey, I really love this industry. I really love the whole idea of people loving your work, and people are just in it for the money. And here was Stan Lee, a person that really loved the medium. So much though that when he got older and during the latest years of his life, he found that he couldn't enjoy the things that he used to love, which was reading, because he couldn't read the text that was on the panels. They were too small for him to read, and that is something that devastated him. That devastated him because he wanted to be able to read what was there, and he couldn't do it, and that's got to be very frustrating for anybody. But let's talk about how long he lived. 95. That is insane to be able to live that long and to have that many stories that you can tell if he was still alive today. 95 years old. That is insane, as I said, to be able to be in that much good health up until the last couple of years. And of course, one of his earliest cameos was also the first time I ever became exposed to one of his works, which was Spider-Man. Because say what you want about the 1995, 93 to 97 series of Spider-Man on Fox, but one of the many things that they got right in that series was that they really nailed the personality of Spider-Man / Peter Parker, the way that they portrayed his character, the way that they showed just how hard he had it to balance his superhero mindset with his real life, and how much he tried to keep his family safe because he led this alter ego life of Spider-Man. and how they conflicted each other and how much he put his own family in danger if anybody were to ever know who he was. And his family was in danger. His family was always in that perpetual state of danger, even if they didn't know that anything was going on. And you saw Peter having real emotions. You saw him having real conflicting moments within himself as to whether or not he should continue to be Spider-Man, whether he should continue to do superhero work. And he always found that there was something about it that called to him, and that is something that Stan Lee was able to show us through that work, that these superheroes behind the masks, behind all the powers and stuff like that, they're also human people, and they showed human emotions. They were able to express that, and he was able to do that really, really well with a lot of his works, especially with X-Men, especially with that whole dynamic of things like racism and bigotry. He was able to tackle all those issues through the mindset of superheroes. He was able to always do that. And no man is ever perfect. No man is ever going to be 100% perfect. Just ask me. I'm not perfect in any sense of the imagination. But he was also always able to show you human aspects within these superheroes. And that was one of the things that the 1995 series of Spider-Man was able to show us. And the final episode of that series actually had a cameo of Stan Lee. Not just a cameo, but there was a couple of scenes that he was in that final moments. There was the whole Secret Wars, which all these Spider-Men from different dimensions were in. And the last one that they tackled was a actor who played Spider-Man on the TV show, and he met Stan Lee, and that was actually the first real exposure I had to his work. Now, that wasn't the last exposure by any stretch of imagination I had of his work. His work has spanned through decades, through centuries, and there's not too many people who are going to be able to say that they made such a mark in several industries that had crossover appeal, that by name recognition, just by saying his name, people know who he is, what he's done throughout the industry. And that is something that's going to make him immortalized. It's going to be immortalized just as much as Jack Kirby is going to be, or has already been, if you take into account several of the memorials in his name, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to The Apocalypse Now Part 2 on the Superman animated series, when Darkseid murdered Dan Turpin, which was modeled after Jack Kirby. I can assure you there's going to be several memorials throughout the Marvel Universe, and maybe even the DC Universe, that is going to memorialize and to immortalize, if he isn't already, Stan's work and Stan the man, Stan the human being, Stan the person who several people have said has a heart of gold, and it definitely showed through so many people. I have not really seen, maybe one or two, but outside of that, no one has a real bad thing to say about Stan the man, and that is something that all of us need to strive to achieve. And I think the reason why it hits me a bit harder than maybe some other people, because this probably hits a lot of people hard, but the reason why I believe that it is really sad to see him go is because for a 95-year-old person, for somebody as old as he is, and somebody who at that age, many people could see people at that age not getting into geek culture, nerd culture as much as they would be as they were younger. Stan Lee got it. At 95 years old, he got it. He really loved what he did. He really loved that medium. He really enjoyed being around those people, those fans. He really enjoyed that all sorts of generations loved his work and loved the medium. He got it, and he got it in dividends. And he identified with a lot of younger people. He identified with a lot of the people from my age, from maybe your age. If you're a teen and you're listening to this right now, he probably identified with you as well. He touched so many people on so many different levels in so many age groups that it is impossible for you to not be somewhat in the know about who he is and what he's done. And he got it. He got what nerd culture was. So much so that he, lended his voice to the Spider-Man video games, and maybe some other video games involved involved in the Marvel Universe as well. The Spider-Man ones were the main ones that I have played, but he probably did some other work in the video game realm as well. And that is amazing to have to say. That is amazing for me to tell people, is that he was a person who told us that it is okay to be a geek and a nerd at that age, that you can still enjoy those types of things at that age, that there is no age limit whatsoever about being into video games or animation or comic books. It doesn't matter what age you are, you can always find a way to identify with characters. It is okay to identify with the people who you see on a screen or in a comic book or in an animation or in a game. It is okay to like these things at that age. There is a reason why at 36 years of age, I still enjoy things like Miraculous Ladybug. It's because of the idea that Stan Lee had put out there, that these types of shows, these types of characters are not just for kids. These are characters that adults can also identify with. They can identify with trying to balance out several parts of your life and trying to find a way in order to make sense of it all. People can identify with that, and I identify with a lot of the stuff that Spider-Man went through, and trying to balance out several parts of my real life and the YouTube channel and my trying to learn how to drive at this point. It's still a work in progress, but you can definitely see why some adults can identify with these characters as well. He was the ultimate person, the ultimate role model in showing that, hey, it is okay to like these things at that age or even a younger age. It is okay to like these things when you're an adult because you can identify with these characters, you can identify with them. And he made it possible because he did it so well. He was the one who pioneered that idea because he was one who got it. One of the major quotes that he was credited to making under the guise of Uncle Ben and Spider-Man was that with great power comes great responsibility. And he had great power and he used it responsibly. He used it in a way that touched a lot of people. Even if you weren't a fan of his work, even if you were more of a fan of the DC side of comic books, I challenge you to look through his work and not be impacted by at least something that he did. He is that much of a legend. He had become that much of a household name, and he is going to be sorely missed in so many ways. And I can't tell you enough just how much his work is going to leave a lasting impression for many, many more generations to come. The guy is one of a kind, and he will always be one of a kind. There will only be one Stan Lee, and there is no way we would have it any other way. You deserve the rest, dude. Do so in peace. And that's gonna do it for this edition of the Special Report. Thanks as always for watching. Please leave your comments down below about what you thought about the episode and of this sad news of the day. I apologize if I'm a little scattershot with this whole thing because yeah, it did hit me, and I just wanted to hear myself talk again for a little bit about just the impact that the man had on my take on the comic book and the animation industry as a whole, and all stuff in between. Please leave a comment down below. Of course, subscribe for more Geek Gaming Culture. You know the drill here. Before I go, I want to give you the OC remix track of the day. Unfortunately, it's really hard to find anything Stan Lee-ish on OC Remix because no one really has done anything for those games. So unfortunately, I don't really think I can find anything that would fit this particular special report. But alas, there is one particular game that there is a remix for that is of a Marvel entity. And I'm not sure if Stan Lee had a hand in it or he had anything to do with it. However, I like this particular remix. I do really like this one. It is just from the second background music in the Silver Surfer NES game. And yeah, say what you want about that game, but this particular remix called Wanking with the Alien, I have no idea why we would name it that, but more power to him, is one that I particularly dig. And it is actually kind of fitting, seeing as how Stan Lee did put Marvel Comics on the map, and if it wasn't for him, maybe Silver Surfer might not have been been made. Maybe people like, hey, we'll put this person on the map as well. So here you go from Midi and Prozacs. This is called Wanking with the Alien. My name is JD Shadow, and in the closing words of Stan Lee, Excelsior.
Excelsior!